from students is हमने static cover नहीं किया है तो current affairs पढ़े कैसे. But what I am saying is most of the current affairs में जो आपको static जानना है वो current affairs के context से ही जानना है. In this respect, we are going to pick up one burning issue and going to solve it during the webinar, where you will not just be reading a content on high performance buildings, which has been in current affairs this year, but you will develop the skill of how to read a particular current affairs topic. Once you're aware of sustainable urbanization as a model, it will be very easy to link high performance buildings with the overall contextual framework of sustainable urbanization. And that will make your preparation more comprehensive and holistic. Hello, everybody. Let's go back in time to circa 2020 and look at the headlines of that year. That was the COVID year. However, many important headlines fluttered the current affairs market. First, Tamil Nadu retained third spot in SDG India Index. It was a live example of a form of competitive federalism. Then you had Supreme Court seeks center's response on plea challenging the NIA Act. Probably students would have read about National Investigation Agency and what are the features of NIA Act that had raised the controversies. Then you had two significant news items that year, which included Citizenship Amendment Act, and the next was Article 370 that was declared on August 5th. So if you look at the news items, you would probably read them in silos. This one we had discussed in the last webinar. And if some of you would have gone one step further, you would have probably read about the one thread linking all these news items. That is on federalism. फेडरलिज्म पढ़ना है मतलब एक तो उसका करंट अफेयर्स जो आपके नॉर्मल करंट अफेयर्स मैगजीन में मिल रहा होगा, and second चीज उसका static, which probably you would have read about Indian federal system and the center state relations. Now come UPSC mains that year. What was the question that UPSC asked? The question included, how far do you think cooperation, competition and confrontation have shaped the nature of federation in India? Cite some recent examples to validate your answer. Now, if we take a cue from our last session, we could directly say that the first part was from static, the second half is from current affairs. But here UPSC has gone one step further. Rather than asking you just about federalism and probably unifying features, it has asked you about the specific aspects of Indian federalism, that is cooperative federalism, competitive federalism, and confrontational federalism. And it has directly asked you to take cues from your current affairs to substantiate these arguments. For introducing your answer, you could have written about cooperation, competition, and confrontation. In the body part, there must have been three segments with each description describing the each keyword and examples to substantiate your answer, which would have addressed the second half of the question. So if you look at the structure of the answer, essentially, it is 60% static, that is the first two columns, introduction and conclusion, and one part that is when you cite the recent examples, that is when current affairs come into fore. Now let's take that question and place it in the year 2024. Now comes circa 2024, there have been significant news items again on federalism. First, if we see of last month only, there is one article which talks about how Supreme Court upholds states' power to regulate industrial alcohol. And then there's one more article and an elaborate discussion on the net borrowing ceiling. Now, if I go back to the same mains question, we could probably again introduce it in a similar way and conclude it in the similar way. The segments and your description also remains same. But what changes is current affairs. Because the second part asks you, cite some recent examples to validate your answer. Now, if we look at these entire two examples in two different time frames, one thing is for sure that static is important. But what is the issue? We would probably read about articles on federalism. because our basic sources does not include study material on cooperation, competitive, and confrontational federalism directly. That is where students mess up their answers in the final exam. So, first rule, it is very important that the point where you are reading current affairs, the static or the contextual static related to that becomes very clear for you. If I look at federalism as a micro theme, I would say the articles which have come this year, it had an aspect of fiscal federalism as well. Now, again, fiscal federalism as a topic is not covered generally or and extensively in your DD Basu's or Lakshmikant. And that is where the current affairs part becomes very important because it clubs the current affairs under a particular static theme, which may or may not be available in your general books. A general question which comes up from students is हमने static cover नहीं किया है तो current affairs पढ़े कैसे? But what I am saying is most of the current affairs में जो आपको static जानना है वो current affairs के context से ही जानना है. You don't have any separate books for that. So it's very important for you to choose very wisely which current affairs you want to follow and how you want to approach your current affairs problems. So, two key problems: chaotic static sources, non contextual themes. In the webinar, we are going to strike at the heart of these two problems and see how we can target current affairs. It's easy to tell कि एक consolidated source बनाना है, उसको notes में लिखना है, one pager notes में, and second contextual frameworks बना देने हैं हर answer का. But again, your approach is also in silos unless your current affairs preparation is giving you the static background of that particular current affairs. It is worthless. In this respect, we are going to pick up one burning issue and going to solve it during the webinar, where you will not just be reading a content on high performance buildings, which has been in current as this year, but you will develop the skill of how to read a particular current affairs topics. Now, this is just a part of the entire Samachar Manthan classes which we take. So you are going to get a glimpse of it. Now, high performance buildings is very critical and you will read the features of it. But what is more important is that it is the next step of sustainable urbanization. And for that, the basics, and as we discussed, contextual basics is important. If we are reading about sustainable urbanization, we are just not going to read the definition of it. We are going to read the components of it: sustainability, inclusiveness, and resilience. And further, what are those aspects which ties these components? Now, once you're aware of sustainable urbanization as a model, it will be very easy to link high performance buildings with the overall contextual framework of sustainable urbanization. And that will make your preparation more comprehensive and holistic. Further, we are going to take one more exercise during the webinar where we are going to try to understand the context of an article. If a policy measure is being taken, what is the base of that policy measure? For example, National Agricultural Code. अगर कोई current affairs magazine regularly पढ़ रहा है, every one of you must be knowing that यहाँ से दो तीन सवाल निकलने हैं. National Agricultural Code, Bureau of Indian Standards. But if this question comes in mains, probably you need to understand what is the philosophy behind this change in policy by Indian government. Now, once you know that, it will become very easy for you to attempt any mains answer. Now, that is what we are going to discuss, as in how National Agricultural Code basically builds a standardization framework for Indian agriculture. Then we are going to discuss what is the role of standardization and how it solves three essential problems of Indian agriculture. So this is the contextual interlinkage with static which we need to talk about. UPSC has changed significantly in the past 4 5 years, and it is evolving year after year. But it's very sad that our current affairs preparation still relies on few magazines which asks you to go after rote learning. Unless you understand the philosophy behind a particular current affairs theme, it would become very difficult for you on the mains day. And in the last lab, we are going to discuss a question of how we can apply that in real time scenario. With that, I'm looking forward to have a chat with you tomorrow at 7 p.m. See you there. Thank you.